Good morning. As you know, my name is Travis Mydock, the chair. I want to thank you for your interest and application for this appointment to serve in the circuit court. If you could, I believe this is the first time the majority of us have interviewed you. If you could give us an introduction about yourself.
Certainly. My name is Zack Miller. I've been a practicing attorney. I started out in private practice and then went into criminal law in the state's attorney's office for approximately 4 years. And then after I left the state attorney's office, I've private practice and then general counsel for organizations since then. The reason I applied for this is after talking with my clients, talking with my family, talking with my friends, they noticed that this has been something I've been speaking about for several years. Public service is very important to me. And I think that I've had experience in both criminal law and civil law, experience serving on a quasi-judicial board, being in front of many administrative agencies, having appellate experience and knowing what goes into a good record. I think I could be an asset to the 7th Judicial Circuit in several areas.
This is currently a vacancy in DeLand that could obviously change. You live in Ponte Vedra, have lived in Ponte Vedra pretty much your whole life. How are you going to handle that commute appointment?
Very fortunate that I have my in-laws live in Palm Coast, and they're gracious enough to let me stay with them whenever I need to. So that's a pretty good stopping place for either staying overnight with them and then being able to commute to DeLand.
You could tell us a little bit about your experience at the state attorney's office. It was in Jacksonville, right?
That's correct.
Tell us about what type of cases you handled there.
Well, I started off my first year. I was very lucky to be in front of the Honorable Tyree Boyer, who taught me a lot about trial practice and motion practice. Really enjoyed being in front of him, although he was tough. Sometimes he would do pick and goes on Monday, and I would have 3 trials in a week. That was a misdemeanor court, sort of a baptism by fire for a year. Then I was also very fortunate to get promoted to felony and be in front of Judge Virginia Norton, who ended up becoming a very good friend of mine, and being in front of her for a year. Then I was in front of Judge Daniel for a year. That was felony line cases, so everything sort of major homicide. Then I got assigned to special prosecution, which was mostly white-collar crime, insurance fraud. I did some RICO cases. I had an interesting case, I think it was my last one, where this was kind of the height of the foreclosure crisis, where an organization of people were breaking into foreclosed and vacant homes, changing the locks, and then renting them out. I believe it was a total of 64 charges. So the information being filed in it was almost as long as the discovery in it. So I got to handle a lot of very interesting cases there. I didn't seek it out, but I ended up doing a lot of first impression cases. I did the first manufacturing of methamphetamine trial in Duval County. I think I noted that in my application. The difficulty in that is because the materials were so explosive, JSO had to destroy all of them before trial. So the only thing I had to go to trial on was pictures. That required a lot of pre-trial litigation to get those into evidence, and unfortunately, we were able to get a conviction.
Talk to us about your current practice.
My current practice, I always like to say the substance is real property, but it varies. I've had to do everything from defamation cases to declaratory judgment to appellate work to writs of certiorari to writs of mandamus to writs of pro quo wanto. I've had to do mostly bench trials because most of the issues are not on damages. I've had to do eminent domain work. I've had to do general civil litigation. I have to do a lot of contract work. I have to do a lot of construction work, both on the defect side and on the person who's being sued for the defect. I have to do a lot of water intrusion cases. My area of law, yes, the substance is usually having to do with real property, but it covers pretty much every area of law. I deal with HOAs and condo associations. For the last 2 years, I've been dealing with the Department of Business and Professional Regulation on the closing condo associations, and accidentally became the expert in the area on that. So there's not too much areas of civil law that I don't currently touch.
And you're a solo practitioner, right?
That's correct.
How do you manage all that litigation as solo? I'm solo and I do criminal. It's hard.
I wake up very early in the morning and I go to bed very late at night, and I have to budget my time. When I have briefs, I try to block out time, usually on the weekend, and I try not to be bothered on it. I have a lot of clients that I serve regularly, and Monday morning is an adventure because I don't know what's going to have popped up. It's been an experience.
Let's say you get appointed and you're on the criminal bench. You have somebody that comes before you on an open plea. They're entering an open plea with no history to a sale of cocaine. What do you consider in fashioning a sentence?
If they have no criminal history, I would think about what their other record is. One, do they have a job? I would think about obviously the amount of cocaine, whether it's trafficking, and there's certain minimum penalties involved with that. The age of the defendant in this case, is this somebody who, is this the first time they got caught, or is this something where they just end up in a bad situation? I believe under 920.021, I think the first criteria listed for departure is, were they an accessory, meaning were they primarily involved in it? If this is a group and they got charged with sale of cocaine and there's 10 other people involved and their interest in it was relatively minor, that's something that's going to weigh heavily on my decision.
Okay. Other than state attorney's office, Sister, what you're doing now, your majority of your career is working for Paul Hardin. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you did for Paul?
I did mostly zoning and land use work, obviously a lot of litigation, very similar to the work I do now. I did a lot of contracts work. I was very fortunate enough to work for the Jacksonville Jaguars when I was there. We worked on the lease amendments that allowed for the amphitheater and the water features, or the pools, to the stadium at the time. I also did a lot of legislative drafting concerning the downtown rules for the city of Jacksonville and how that dealt with the development of the shipyards. I'm also very fortunate to represent the Jumbo Shrimp in negotiating their lease agreement with the city for the use of the ballpark. But it wasn't just in Duval County, Florida. When I was involved in several litigation matters in St. Johns County. I think one involving Mr. Arnold. I think I was also, I think the first month I was with Paul, it was a major litigation with the development of regional impact that ultimately became Beacon Lakes and Beach Walk. That was a 2-month process that ended with a pretty contentious mediation and settlement in Tallahassee. Involved administrative challenge, a petition for writ of certiorari, and a declaratory judgment. Paul, working with him was very similar to my job now. I'd show up Monday morning and wasn't quite sure what was going to hit me.
Why the short employment with the Baptist and Summit? I think about a year.
Well, with Baptist, I had the greatest boss ever, Mr. Keith DeKell. I learned a lot with him and got to work with him. 6 months, I started in the fall of 2019, COVID hit. And we were working in the building downtown at Baptist on the South Bank. When COVID hit, I actually had been exposed to someone who had gotten COVID and was asked to stay home. After that point in time, they made it so that anybody that wasn't essential personnel, and the attorneys weren't, had to work from home. My primary role there was a general counsel with real estate matters, so that was leases and negotiating purchase and sales and construction. And what would happen is I was working at home and I would be done with my work by 11 o'clock in the morning. I don't like to sit idly by. I talked to my boss, Keith, and he said, look, if you have the opportunity to have other work, that's something you should explore. I was very fortunate they still hired me to do work outside counsel. With Summit, it was kind of the same thing. They were very generous to offer me a position. I enjoyed working there. I loved going to construction sites. I loved meeting the people who actually do the work. I used to show up and they'd ask me questions. I'd say, you gentlemen and ladies are the ones doing the actual work with the real jobs. I'm just the attorney. But it was sort of the same thing. I would be done with my work at 11 or noon, and I would still be getting calls from clients that I used to represent working for Paul, Mr. Hardin, and I just realized that I don't like sitting around not doing anything, especially if I'm getting a paycheck. I like to work. I like to have my day full. I like to have my weekends full.
If you are appointed, can you name a Seventh Circuit sitting judge now that you would seek out as a mentor, and why?
I think just based on experience, it would probably be Judge Maltz. I have had several cases with him. It's weird. I had some cases with him, and then there was a break, and now I've actually got a few with him. Obviously, his experience there. I know he was with the city of Jacksonville for a while, so I think he knows how to create a good record. I also think he knows how to move cases along, which is something I value very much in a judge.
In what you had commented that you thought that you would be able to, I think, assist the Seventh Circuit in terms of, I wasn't sure what is it that you think, A, requires assistance, and B, what is the assistance that you think you would bring?
Well, to use a sports metaphor, I consider myself sort of a utility player. So having both experience in criminal and civil, if I need to go to criminal, I can do that, and I think I can hit the ground running. If it's civil, I think I can also do that. I've had some experience in family. If that's needed, I think I can do that. I think that it's not to disparage any of the judges in the seventh, but I think having somebody who has such varied experience and is used to learning new law on the fly or picking up on things very quickly could be an asset. Instead of someone who's just focused and primarily been criminal law, or someone who's just been civil law or just been family law.
You alluded to Tyree Boyer, Virginia Norton, Jim Daniels. If I was correct, I didn't see that any of them or any judges were listed as references. Was that deliberate? Was that? Tell me about that.
It was. When I started speaking to people who had been through this process before, I was advised not to put sitting judges as recommendations, that it's better to have people that you've worked with. If I would have known that would have been advised, I would have no problem putting any of them on that list, as well as other judges that I've appeared in front of.
As a candidate for judge, you have to know the judicial canons in Florida. Have you read those before?
Yes, I have.
How many times?
More than I can count.
Yeah. As you stand there now, how many of those apply to you?
Well, expressly, I think it's only judicial canon number 7, which applies to judicial members and judicial candidates. They're not allowed to engage in any inappropriate political activity. But I always look to, I believe, judicial canon number 3, even though I'm not a judge, says you should act impartially and diligently. And that second part is something I've always worked in. Whether at the state attorney's office or in private practice, I don't think I've ever missed a deadline.
What do you think are the top 3 most important qualities of a great judge?
A great judge is, I think, someone who both speaking and in writing will use only one word instead of 2. I think it's important to convey something in a very clear and concise manner, and I think actually my background in journalism is in that. I think it's being able to listen and have empathy, not necessarily sympathy, but understanding where people are coming from. Understanding the attorney in front of you, that they may be a solo practitioner, and that affects how they appear in front of a judge, or they're a state attorney and they've only been such for a year or 2 years, or a public defender. I think it's also having empathy towards either the defendant or the clients, and understanding the position. This case is going to affect the rest of their life. It may be one of 500 cases, but they're going to remember that moment in your courtroom for forever. And finally, understanding that when you take your time, make rulings, and that you should be diligent in making your rulings, that things taking too long have a profound effect on people.
In closing, anything you want to highlight before we deliberate?
Well, I want to thank each and every one of you. I know that you are all doing what I'm asking to do, which is serve in a public body to choose what I think is roles in our community. Every one of you that's here today means that someone is covering for you in a mediation, someone's covering for you in private practice and general counsel, someone's covering for you in a courthouse, someone's covering you meeting with clients. So I want to thank you all for your service.
Thank you.